What's up, guys? It's Matt. On this week's edition of the TKW podcast, I am joined first by Kyle Maggio to talk about the latest in Knicks land. We talk about Summer League play, we talk about Troy Williams, we talk about the Kawhi trade a little bit, just kind of what's going on around the NBA and the Knicks. And then we're joined by Barbara Barker from Newsday to talk about her excellent story on Tim Hardaway Jr. And then we also talk a little bit about women's sports and where that is going in the future. So without further ado, let's go.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia. This is Houston, AOS over.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the TKW podcast. I'm Matt Spendley, and I'm joined, as always, by Kyle Maggio.
What's going on, my good friend?
Nothing much. What's up with you, buddy? How's everything going?
It's going. We had a fairly eventful week, I think, for the Knicks in the summer league. But outside of that, nothing crazy.
It's been some other NBA stuff with Kawhi getting moved today. It's just craziness, and it
something.
happened overnight too. So it's one of those things. I was up until I think 12:31 last night, and then it happened in the middle of the night. And then I think the first tweet I woke up to, which really confused me, was Chris Haynes saying Kawhi does not want to play with Toronto. But then I was seeing everyone else saying he was traded to Toronto. So I was like, okay, someone tell me what's going on here, because I'm baffled.
Yeah, that was exactly my reaction. I woke up, and those are the first two alerts that I had on my phone. And because normally I would have Shams and Woj and Haynes and Stein and the other guys.
Is he
yeah. Was it Woj or Woj? Because I've heard it like three different ways, and I'm very confused.
Woj. Say it
okay.
with me, Woj.
Woj.
There you
Okay. Okay. So I have to stay on brand at this point.
I got you. See, that's why I'm here. If I don't correct you, I'm not doing my job right.
So I woke up and I saw, Woj tweet that basically the deal was in principle, they're ready to go. And then the very next thing I see on top of that notification on my lock screen was Chris Haynes saying Kawhi has no interest in playing for Toronto. And I woke up very early this morning, as I told you guys in the Slack chat. So when I got those two messages, I was perplexed.
Yeah. What did you have any initial thoughts on the trade, like just briefly before we get into some news and notes on the Knicks stuff?
I thought it was a good move I really enjoyed DeMar DeRozan.
For sure.
I wouldn't say I'm caping for him ever or on Twitter, but I feel he gets undervalued a little bit in the 3-point era, and people forget, a little bit of the playmaking and other things that he brings to the table. He's really good at getting to the rim, and just there's a lot that he's really, really exceptional at, and I feel like that gets overlooked. And my first reaction was, well, yeah, that's a gamble you got to take. It's hard to part with a big piece of what your franchise is, especially one that's as young as Toronto is. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that was it's a necessary risk. You get an MVP type guy. They've had trouble getting over the hump for years now with DeRozan and co. And a lot of that was because of LeBron, who's no longer here, which almost strengthens the point as to why you would want to do it. Now you get Kawhi in a sort of wide open East. You bring back almost all of a 59-win team outside of DeRozan, and you're sort of running it back with an MVP candidate when healthy. So in a weaker conference without LeBron, who's been your, kryptonite, I think that's a great, attempt anyway at trying to, take a stab at trying to win it, finally get over the hump. I don't know. What did you think?
Well, my favorite part about the Toronto side of this is there's really no risk involved, because unless you love DeRozan that much, this deal is going to end up with Kawhi Leonard most likely leaving, the Raptors having some money off the books, and at the end of the day, it's a risk in the smallest sense of the word. I don't think it's a risk at all for Toronto. And for San Antonio, I just think it's such a clear case of them wanting to give Popovich a team to send him off with, because if they wanted to get some young guys, I think they could have, and they decided to go this direction I'm convinced for that sole purpose because they didn't want to have Pop have no star on his team for his last couple years in the league. That's how I see it. So I'm excited because I think if Kawhi reports, which who knows, I mean, we would all think he would because he wants to make money. But at this point, he's said he doesn't want to play there. Who knows? But I mean, it's going to be interesting.
The last thing I'll say is there's no doubt in my mind that he shows up.
Yeah,
it would be an unprecedented level of stupidity for him to not show up. I understand last year he didn't show up, with the Spurs, and he at least had the injury card to play. There's no injury card to play now. Like you're gonna be healthy enough to be traded per the physical. That's sort of inevitable. We knew it was mostly you were healthy, but now you suddenly didn't trust the Spurs. That was the rationale as to where the falling out came. It would be absolutely unprecedented for him to get traded and not show up. And not only are you already losing money because you're gonna walk at the end of the season, you're gonna sign elsewhere. You're already gonna lose money, and on top of that, you're willing to take on and accumulate fines on top of fines for missing practices, for not reporting. I forgot what the exact ruling was. I was looking at the rules before. I think it's after like 30 days if you still continue to not report without a valid reason and anything else. So basically, he's going to have to forfeit salary. He's going to have to get fined. It's just I forgot what the total tally would be of number. I think it's like $100 million that he would miss out on.
It's a good chunk of change. Yeah. Are you at all worried he's not the same player or he won't be the same player?
No, I think he's going to be the same player.
Because I'm not worried about it at all. I saw some people kind of talking about that on Twitter. That's not a worry that I share at all.
No, I'm not worried about that. I think he's perfectly fine. I think he's just kind of being a little bit of a prima donna about this now. And I held off on that for a really, really, really long time. I saw other people getting on the bandwagon, and I didn't feel it at all. I thought, you know what? He's probably just not healthy. He probably feels something. He's got to trust his guys. And then all of a sudden you start hearing about this crazy uncle in the background, supposedly. And I just, enough is enough.
Yeah, the whole situation has been wild. The number one thing that took me back when I was going through this, and you realize that the Spurs, I still think they'll be okay this year, but when I was on Tankathon, they had the Spurs as the last team to miss the playoffs, and it was the strangest thing to see the lottery, the Spurs are in the lottery because it's been so long since they've been in that position. It really took me back. I was like, holy shit, this is coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, in other news, so Troy Williams,
yes.
We might as well just address it on the podcast.
Let's talk about him.
So we ran an article the day Troy Williams got waived.
Shout out to Mike Cortez.
Shout out to Mike Cortez because it was actually really good, and I think most of us believed it, and most fans seemed to acknowledge that he was going to play a pretty big role on this team as a bench guy, as a contributor. And we kind of Mike wrote about that, and it was good. And 2 hours later, and the title was how Troy Williams secured his bag, it's a bold title because we felt he did, and then he didn't. In fact, he got waived. So, what were your initial thoughts when you saw that? Because I was surprised.
Well, first of all, it was funny because I edited Mike's piece overnight and then it posted. So we put it on Twitter. We're talking with people about it. And I head out to lunch and I have the push notifications on for Knicks PR and get some emails and whatever. And it says Knicks waived Troy Williams. And I kind of did a double take because it's not what I was expecting to see. Because, like we said, we had written this piece just hours before. So I thought it was a mistake. So I let it sit for like a minute. And then I read it again, and I was like, oh, they actually did this. And we have a tweet scheduled for like 30 minutes from now that says Troy Williams secured his bag and will play a nice role for the Knicks during this season. So it was hysterical. But beyond the funny side of this, it's not a big deal. This is one of your end-of-the-bench guys. I think people that were upset about it, here's all I would tell you. If they cut him, they clearly had no plans for him this year anyways. So unless you think he's some guy they're going to miss out on, when they got rid of him, they looked up and down the roster and said, we don't think Troy Williams is going to play a role for this team this year. So rather than pay him this contract and have to worry about pulling other pieces around the roster to make this fit, because as we know, they were over the allotted number of contracts that can be on the NBA roster. So they always had to get rid of someone. The speculation had been it might be a Joakim Noah because of all the stuff that they've been going through. But with Williams, it's clear that they sat down and looked and just determined that he was not going to be a player for this team this season.
I mean, it makes sense the way that things kind of shook out, I guess. They brought in Hazonia. I think they probably feel he's probably got higher upside
Which
to
is
contribute.
100% true.
Which is
Obviously,
true.
yes.
Troy's a really nice player. I thought he showed a lot of really nice things with us, and I think because of that, that's one reason why they cut him, because he was non-guaranteed, and they figured he could play that same nice role for somebody else, possibly a playoff team or a contender. But they signed Hazonia, which seems like they want to get the most out of him. It's a tryout, basically. And on top of that, you signed Kevin Knox. So those are two guys that are going to occupy, Hazonia the 2 and the 3, maybe some 4. I doubt it. Probably just stick to the 2 and the 3. Knox is going to be the 3 and the 4. On top of that, I don't know. Lance is going to still have to play 3 and the 4. You still have Courtney Lee, who's going to play the 3. Timmy's going to play the 2 and the 3. Like, you have a lot of guys where Troy Williams would have played. And though I think it still would have been nice to have him over Aron Baker. I know JB was talking about it on Twitter that it's Dolan's money. You might as well just eat the money on Baker and cut him and keep the higher upside guy and Troy Williams and let him run out in Fizdale's system. And I agree. But I also understand how easy it is to just cut the non-guaranteed contract and send him on his way. So it stinks. I liked him. I liked him a lot. I was pleasantly surprised last season after we picked him up, but
Yeah, he's fine. He's a fine player. He might catch on somewhere else. He might end up in the G League, whatever. He's a guy that in Summer League looked fine. He just got ahead of himself a lot because he knows he's fast and he'll play in transition. He's not a good three-point shooter, so you eliminate that 3-and-D right off the bat because he's not someone that defense is respecting from 3. He struggled in Summer League. He hasn't historically been anything more than a slightly below average three-point shooter throughout his brief NBA career and in college. So what is a guy like that really bringing to the table? Okay, so maybe he can play in transition. He can maybe play some defense. He can have some switchability from a 3 to a 4 perspective, but it's really not worth getting in a whole tizzy about because it's the end of the roster guy, and I think it's just you're still having a bunch of young guys. This would be different if they were cutting him and then giving minutes to, a 32-year-old guy that didn't have plans for the roster, or a 33-year-old guy, someone like that that's a bit older and wouldn't have any means to have a future with this team. And you could say, oh, what about Courtney Lee? He's a guy they're going to try to trade, so you have to play him. You're not going to do anything different there. And who knows if he's on the roster at the beginning of the season. But with Troy Williams, we'll see if he catches on somewhere else. Anyone who likes him, keep an eye out. Maybe he'll catch on somewhere, but his skill set will definitely have to improve a lot if he's going to play a significant role for any team in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the good news for us, just as Knicks fans, is what we saw from Kevin Knox. Maybe we're going to see a lot more of it now. I mean, that was my takeaway too, is we're going to see more Hazonia and more Knox. I doubt that Lance is going to get tons and tons and tons of burn this season. I doubt that. I think the general feeling is Courtney Lee is going to get moved this summer. I think that's been rumored a little bit, or at least that's the feeling a lot of us get. So I think between those two things, it's pretty obvious that, maybe we're going to get a little bit more out of some of these young guys that we're excited to see. So it's a good thing overall, but still surprising nonetheless.
Yep, for sure. All right, brief Summer League wrap-up. We saw Kevin Knox make the first team, which was awesome because you had some other high prospects up there. And then Mitchell Robinson missed out on the second team, and we were kind of joking about that because you had a bit of a pick bias for sure in there because Ayton and Jaren Jackson were comparable or perhaps worse than Robinson was during Summer League and ended up making the second team. Doesn't really matter, but if we're not firing these jokes off, what are we doing?
Yeah,
not existing.
No, I mean, we have to make light of it. I actually was surprised he didn't make the second team.
Yeah, I was too.
Because he really just statistically put up those good numbers, but on top of that, he just looked, better than everybody he was playing. He struggled a little bit with fouls and maybe sometimes his vertical ability. But
are they going to say verticality and I just got shades of Roy Hibbert?
Yeah, and well, that's what I wanted to do, but I was butchering it, so I went the other direction. So I don't know. I was surprised he didn't make second team. I didn't think first team, but I was surprised. I saw the case for the guys they put on for first team, but my initial reaction was, oh, okay, well, he'll make second team then pretty easily, and then he didn't.
Bro, this Josh Hart thing really pissed me off. What is this guy doing in Summer League? He wins Summer League MVP. This guy started for the Lakers last year, and the Lakers, after the beginning of the season, were a completely decent team. What are you doing? This guy played a good role. People like him as a prospect, and he's in his second year, a clear NBA player that probably will start again for the Lakers this year or come off the bench as their sixth man, depending on what they do with KCP and how they like to go about these lineups. But that just bothers me. It's like when John Collins playing in the Summer League. Like, dude, you were on the all-rookie team last year. What are you doing?
I mean, it makes sense that he played, but it didn't make sense that he played. No, it did, but it didn't make sense that he played as long as he did. We see plenty of second-year guys go out there and play. It just doesn't make sense that he went out there and played the entire tournament. Normally, these guys come in, they'll play a couple of games like Frank Ntilikina did, or like Shumpert did back in the day, or Collins in Atlanta only played a couple of games. Normally that's the status quo. Get in, get your feet wet. We're going to try you out at a couple different experimental spots and kind of get you going in a different direction. But to play the whole tournament was surprising. But I don't know. I'm sure they asked him if he wanted to play, if he wanted to get the run.
Well, Jaylen Brown apparently wanted to play in the Summer League. It shouldn't be about whether these guys want to play. It should be if they're too good to be playing in this league. Jaylen Brown should never be playing in the Summer League. He was a borderline top 30 player in the league last year. But whatever.
I think you're getting ahead of yourself. But anyway.
Whatever. Not worth it. Not worth getting in a tizzy about. Just pissed me off because when the Knicks were playing the first game and I'm looking, I'm like, what the hell is John Collins doing out there?
You know what is worth getting in a tizzy?
What?
People saying Tim Hardaway Jr. is worse than he really is.
Ooh. Would you rather have Zach LaVine or Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Tim Hardaway Jr.
What if they had the exact same contract starting 4 years right now?
Tim Hardaway Jr.
Okay.
I really like LaVine, but LaVine is really just one-dimensional. And I like to cape for my scoring guys and defense is overrated, but LaVine really is just a high-volume guy, and he brings nothing else. Not little else, not he struggles here. He's just not good unless he's putting the ball in the hoop. That's it.
And he's one of the worst defenders in the league, if not the worst.
Yeah, and again, he's a nice player. I think there's a role for him. It's not like I don't want to talk about him like he's Andrew Wiggins either, because I think at this point I would take LaVine pretty easily over Wiggins. But I don't know, Timmy. I understand that he shot career worsts basically last year. He didn't shoot anywhere near his career average from three. He didn't shoot well from the field at 42-ish%. I understand that, and that's alarming. I would assume that's going to go up this year just because this was his first year with such high volume, too. He played more than around a third of a year without Kristaps. So, I mean, it was a lot for him to take on. This is the biggest role he's had in the NBA so far with Kristaps or without Kristaps. So I understood the dip in efficiency. I would expect that that's going to go back up next year, kind of towards his old averages. But he's also an underrated playmaker. He's really good at getting to the rim, kicking out, or making that one extra little play. He's much improved in there anyway. And he's an all right defender. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. He's not going to lock anybody down for stretches or, long durations, but he's a good defender. So he's more well-rounded, and I think if you have that, you kind of live with, I don't know. I don't believe in the percentages from last year. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think good defender is putting it strongly. I think he's average at best, and on his worst days, he just gets lost a lot on screens, and you see him that he doesn't completely grasp the concepts. But anyways, about his shooting, he started off the year so terribly, and we'll remember, and he had a nice stretch when he came back from injury. The first year was a strange one for him, because as you mentioned, he went from being a sidekick to all of a sudden being asked to be this main role after coming back from injury, and Kristaps is gone. He's going to shoot better from three this year. I would bet my life on it. He can't be that poor again. Based on everything that we know about his shooting, his history, I want him to take that many threes again this year. He should be taking 6-7 threes a game. I'm totally fine with that. If he's hitting those at 36%, all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that could threaten to score 20 points a game. He scored 17.5 last year. The efficiency is going to uptick. I like that you mentioned his playmaking because I agree. I've long thought that he was a bit of an underrated playmaker in the pick and roll. He scores decently in the advanced metrics, and that's with a fairly small sample size that could be expanded upon, especially with the Knicks not exactly having a point guard that's going to dominate the basketball, because the way that they're going to play, you're going to have Trey Burke, Frank Ntilikina, Emmanuel Mudiay, Kevin Knox, and then Tim Hardaway doing a lot of the ball handling. So you're going to have a lot of different guys that are playing in the same position at different moments in terms of ball handling. So I've always been a defender of Tim Hardaway. His contract is definitely too much, but it's not too much to the point where it's an albatross. It's not a tradable deal due to the current economy in the NBA. But if he was on a 4-year, like let's say he got the deal Marcus Smart just got, like 4 years, $50 million, like that's a very palatable deal. And when you're talking about the Knicks, who are moving forward going to have cap space, he's not a guy that I'm clamoring to trade like some people are. Like people are like, get him off this roster right now. What is he doing for you? Well, he's providing you shooting, which the Knicks have severely lacked for a long time. So I'm hoping Fizdale taps into this, run all the sets for Timmy, get him some more threes, hone him in, just grab him by the shoulders, say, you're a good offensive player. I need you to take 10 to 15% less of those bad shots you take, and I will give you better opportunities. Your point guards are going to set you up better than you can set yourself up. And that's how you're going to get him to reach his ceiling, which hopefully will happen this season because he'll be asked to do a lot for this team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Marcus Smart thing because I think he's rumored around 50 or 55 million. We're still trying to get the final, but it's in that ballpark. And we're still trying to figure out what exactly that's going to be. But had Tim Hardaway Jr., who's coming into that contract, was an average three-point shooter, more or less, thereabouts, and was somebody who looked like he was much improved in transition, with cutting, with getting to the rim, with basic playmaking ability. And when we keep saying playmaking, I remember I said this in the beginning of last season, and I got lambasted for calling him a playmaker by some of our followers. I'm not saying he's like Nicholas Batum. I'm not saying he's like a LeBron. I'm not saying it's anything like that. I'm saying he's not going to Andrew Wiggins you from the wing. He's coming down. He's capable and willing to make those passes.
You see the instincts when he's playing.
Yes, like
you see it there. He understands.
His head is no longer down when he gets to the rim.
Yeah,
he's keeping his head up. He's looking, okay, if I have the angle, I'm gonna take it. If not, I'll kick it out, kind of thing. Just basic. I'm not trying to laud him or anything as being some exceptional playmaker, but just the basic playmaking ability. But had the Knicks signed him to basically the Marcus, Smart contract, then everyone's like, oh, what a great deal. They got him a little bit below market value. Look at for somebody who's well-rounded, then that's something that typically gets lauded.
Yeah, and we should mention when the Knicks gave him that much money because they didn't want the Hawks to match, because we got to keep in mind he was a restricted free agent. So maybe if the Knicks gave him that contract, the Hawks would have just matched it.
And if you remember when we recorded last year, I broke it down this way too. I said, okay, so the Hawks were reported to saying 45 to 50 million was all they were going to do for Tim Hardaway Jr. Okay. So even if that's true, that's $20 million, right? So basically we're overpaying by $5 million a year for 4 years. That's not really a gross overpay in my opinion. It's an overpay. I'm not denying that, but it's not like this. Again, it's not like an albatross thing.
It's not like Andrew Wiggins. Like we brought up Wiggins a couple of times, where you're looking at his contract and you're saying, I would not want to be that team paying him that much money.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's really all I got to say about that, unfortunately. People like to make fun of him because of the number, but
yeah,
he was already going to get that from some team. He was going to get 60 to 65 million from somebody is the point. Yep. So I don't know.
It's possible. The Knicks definitely overpaid, and who knows what would have happened had they not given out that contract. Maybe Atlanta re-signs him at a lower figure. But let's bring on Barb. We'll talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. as a leader and a bit about his relationship with his dad. All right, so we're back. We're joined by Barbara Barker from Newsday, who just wrote a great story about Tim Hardaway Jr. Barbara, how's it going?
I'm doing well, you guys. How about you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. So we just wanted to talk about the story a bit because Hardaway Jr. has been a polarizing figure for the Knicks since the second that he inked the contract. So I guess to start off, what motivated you to kind of attack this angle and go at Tim Hardaway Jr. at just about the relationship with his dad and then what he's been through in the NBA so far?
I mean, this is a story I really wanted to do, and I was bugging the Knicks about basically since towards the end of the season. All right, I wanted to do it in the off season. I just thought there had to be more. I do think he's. I mean, I do understand that he's a lightning rod. The guy's getting paid a ton of money. Although, what is he supposed to do? Turn it down when they offer it to him, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I understand it's but I just thought there was something more there that hadn't been done. And I'd read little things here and there, and I just thought he would talk about it. And so I just kept bugging them, and it sort of worked out. And I don't know. I also found him to be a different. I thought he was a little bit more intense than he was in his first go around with the Knicks. And so I thought there might be something. And I just wondered what the heck happens when you get sent down to the G League when you're a first round draft pick and your dad is a god. I mean, I always wondered about that too. I mean, that would be tough to deal with. I had a lot of questions. I just wanted to know what went on in his head. And I just thought it would be a good story.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that we were all kind of thinking too, because it happened really quickly when they signed him.
Yeah.
Normally, these things kind of get rumored for a couple of days or a week or what have you, and then suddenly the news breaks at, let's say 2 a.m. like the Kawhi Leonard trade today. But
Right.
I mean, I remember I got home from work when this happened, and it just kind of appeared out of the blue, and they're just like, hey, the Knicks have signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to 4 years, $71 million. And everyone was just kind of like, well, all right then. And then everybody had to suddenly digest it. But to your point about there had to be more to it, what do you think? I know they referenced the G League and a lot of things that may have happened with his father, but what do you think kind of helped shape his journey to kind of become more of a leader or come into his own anyway on this current team?
I think he was probably, I wasn't in his household, but I think he was a pampered kid growing up. All right. And I think I mean, obviously I covered his dad. All right. So I covered his dad. I'm like older than dirt. All right. So I covered his you're really old when you're covering the kids of people you covered when you first started covering the league. I'm like, it's so pathetic. But anyway, I covered his dad. I did not cover Curry's dad, but I covered the Knicks when they had a lot of series, when they had those, great battles with the Heat. And a lot of times I would be the reporter down, like doing the Heat stories. So I covered his dad, and his dad had just such an edge, just such an incredible edge. I mean, Tim has a different body. He's a different game. He's a different guy, but he didn't, like the first time, have that. I just never saw that edge. And last year, a couple times when I was with the Knicks, I saw the edge, whether the edge is when he's getting mad at reporters or, he had a few games where I saw it too. And I just wondered, like, where did it come from? Because I didn't see it before, So, I think when you're used to staying in the Ritz-Carlton and you're, like, sleeping on a bus on I-80 between, Fort Wayne, Indiana and, wherever, Canton, Ohio or something, it's, you're wondering, what the heck is going on with my life?
Right. And it's something that generationally the NBA has basically had to cope with, because you hear a lot of the guys from the older generation talk about how the game is different now. And I think Senior and Junior are completely emblematic of that philosophy, because that's exactly what they embody.
Right, exactly. And they're playing the way actually that works well for the time that they're playing. And I mean, granted, Senior was, Senior's, has Hall of Fame numbers. All right. So, close to it, but, you're right. That's a very good description. And they're very, and anyway, I just thought the relationship, I was very interested in the relationship. And then I read a story from when he went to Michigan that was written by like somebody, like somebody at the Michigan Daily. And it was so good about what kind of a jerk Tim Sr. was to his son that I knew I wanted to talk to him about it. Because I thought it was sick. Not sick, but I just thought it's,
In a way, for sure. And it's, the father-son relationship is always tough with these kind of things.
Right.
To that point again, I guess when you talked a lot in the piece, you mentioned a couple big turning points in Junior's life, whether it was him going to the game and having his dad sit up and not coach him through the game, and his dad being able to take a step back and say, wow, look at what I've done, and then they have the nice conversation and they apologize. And you mentioned him going to the NBA and having some of those feelings come back where he felt a little entitled, and then they sent him down, and maybe that just gave him some perspective. Do you think that one of these turning point moments will come again, or do you think that he is basically through that and he's completely ready to assume a big leadership role for this team?
Well, Let's hope he doesn't have to keep going through turning points for fans, all right? I mean, you can only turn so many times before you've turned all the way around, right? So I'm hoping, Knicks fans should be hoping that this guy, is hungry. He's saying the right things. He's working with the young players. They have told him they want him to work with the young players. KP is, out. They're going to, he was the second leading scorer last year. It was kind of a weird year because he had that leg injury and stuff. So it wasn't a complete year. There are times he played really well. He's not playing. That contract is just, an albatross around his neck. Knicks fans aren't paying the contract, I guess.
Exactly.
But it is, yeah. So, it's really just the contract. And the fact it was so stunning, like you mentioned, when it happened. Really, that just came, I don't know the exact number of days, but, I think that was kind of a signal, Steve Mills signaling maybe Phil is gone. All right. I think that was just, or maybe it was just they had to. It was very soon after Phil was gone, right? And it was before Scott Perry was in, so it's like that little window there. And I think Steve knows Timmy pretty well, and I think he has a lot of confidence in him. So it was one of his guys.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if you knew anything that may have happened behind the scenes because it had happened so quickly, but that would make sense,
I think they kept tabs. I think Steve was in the league. Okay, so this is a guess. All right. So Steve was very involved, I think, with some of the Olympic basketball and maybe when Tim played. I know he knows Tim pretty well. All right. Now, I'm not saying that Tim got to get his job and kid job with the Knicks. That's not what's going on here. But I think there's a relationship over the years. And I think he kept in touch with Tim after he went to. I know that he kept in touch with him after they went down. So Steve likes him a lot.
Yeah, and he's a guy that they've talked about potentially being a part of the future, or if he'll ever end up being around. That's been a big point of contention for Knicks fans now, not only his contract, but then should they end up moving on from him. So just, do you think that he's the type of guy that the Knicks would keep around? Because do you think it matters enough that Mills likes him, and when the big free agent class comes next year and you're going to have all this money opening up, do you think he's a guy the Knicks value that much?
No, you could like a guy to come in when you're changing things, and maybe you think he's going to have the right attitude, and you're going to change a bunch of stuff. I don't think you like anybody enough to keep them around if you have a chance to really make your team better. So is he a bridge to somewhere else? That's possible. All right, maybe it's not possible. Maybe he's it's not like he's KP where they would never consider trading him. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. They like him a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say the last thing sort of on his play was, had he shot 3 percentage points better from the field, I don't think everybody's really outraged. It was just that his field goal percentage was lower.
From 3-point, it was terrible.
Yeah, it was 30. What was it? 31% from 3. 42% from the field. It wasn't good. But I was saying to Matt a little bit earlier, he did do other things well. Like he got to the rim better than he had, obviously in his first stint with the Knicks, when he basically only shot threes from the corner. Here he's getting to the rim a little bit more. He's playmaking a little bit more. He's playing a little bit better defense. Like, a lot of his game really did progress and really did evolve since his first stint, since being in Atlanta. So I liked a lot of what I saw, but it's like, had he just hit some more shots, not even a tremendous amount, but had he just shot 35%, 35% from 3, 44% from the field, I don't think everyone's kind of screaming that his contract is that outrageous. And then at that point, you look and you go, we have a guy who's kind of a league average offensive point guard in terms of his shooting ability. And then, well, look, he could also play make a little bit. He could also play some defense. He's 25, 26 years old. That's kind of a good guy to go with. I think, honestly, I don't know if there's any truth to it, but I feel like just having that field goal percentage be what it was is really the big mark on his record here.
Right, right. Well, I mean, yeah, that is true. I mean, I think also, I mean, I'd like to see a complete year without. Last year was such a bad year in so many ways. All right, I mean, it was just a bad year. I'd like to, with the injuries and everything. I mean, with him, KP, I'd like to see. It'll be interesting to see to see what he can do this year. It will be, but I agree. It's the shooting, but I'm sure you guys get so many tweets and people who listen to you, talk to you. I mean, he is really not liked by Knicks fans. I mean, this story, oh my gosh, it's the stuff I got back.
What's the reaction been like? Well, what have you been seeing? What are some of the comments?
Well, I mean, okay, I'd say it's about the comments that are against him are very strong. Like, who cares about a feel-good story? The guy is a wuss, that kind of stuff.
Sports
right?
fans are the worst.
Right. And then, but then there's a lot of people who like the story. I mean, who liked, the background. I mean, you got to know your strengths. My strengths are kind of the human interest stories. I like running those. I like reading those. You know what I mean? So I just thought I wanted to find out what made the guy tick, because I don't think anyone had written what guy in New York would have made him tick. I had not seen guy from CBS.com did a pretty good story talking about how he was, depressed or down. I don't know if he used the word depressed. I saw that. But other than that, I really hadn't seen, a story other than the fact, him reacting to like the humiliation of the Greek Freak or, this and that. But I hadn't really seen a story about what he thought and stuff. So, I mean, I really wanted to do the story.
Yeah, and we learned a lot just from reading it. So anyone that hasn't read Barbara's piece over at Newsday yet, definitely go do that. Quick general question about the Knicks, because we've talked a lot about this on this program, about how the franchise is shifting a bit, but it's taking people on the outside a while to understand that the Knicks aren't the Knicks of the early 2000s into the late 2000s that are just doing stupid things, and we joke LOL Knicks is what people say. Do you share the vibe that you can feel something shifting? Because I know you've been around the team for a long time.
I do feel, I want to say yes, but like being around the team for a long fan, like any Knicks fan, you sort of don't want to get sucked in sometimes, right?
Yeah, we have that problem too. You don't want to get too high because you're just going to get let down.
Right. I do think there's a group of people on the same page. That's what they're always talking about, which is kind of boring, but it's actually kind of important, that share a vision. I mean, the Phil Jackson years, there was just too many battles going on. I mean, I don't think Phil ever wanted to be here. And I mean, I know he turned down the job multiple times before the money got so big that he had to say yes. It wasn't a good plan. There's been a lot of bad plans, as you guys know. And there's been a lot of bad plans. And then the next good-looking good-looking coach walks by, and you completely change the plan again,
That's exactly how they do.
I mean, really, I would say, except for, I mean, I think Woody was a pretty good coach, but except, there was that period there. But other than that, it's been pretty terrible since Van Gundy left, So, I mean, there's been spots. There's been definitely spots. But
any hope we can find, because Knicks fans have been really excited over the summer league because Kevin Knox has looked awesome, and Mitch Robinson and people like Frank Ntilikina. So there's a sense of hope in the air from fans, which hasn't been there in a while.
I'm a huge Frank fan.
Our people love Frank too. Our staff, people we interact with on Twitter, he is a huge fan favorite.
Yeah, he's great. I really like Frank. I really like Frank.
So, last thing we wanted to bring up before we let you go, I know something you wrote about in June, and it's become a really hot topic over the summer with the WNBA kind of reaching a fever pitch almost, and people being more interested, is just the general interest in women's sports and how we need to be more proactive in giving these women the money and the attention that they deserve. Do you just want to talk about that for a little bit, and what you kind of think you should champion here for this cause?
I mean, I kind of do, and I'm going to tell you, I mean, I've been covering sports a long time, and early on, I did not cover women's sports. The reason I didn't cover women's sports is I wanted to make a career for myself, and nobody paid attention to them. And I feel guilty about that, actually. Now I had a daughter who's a swimmer. I see that, I think it's important, and sometimes you got to stand back and look, and it's difficult because most sports talk radio shows, and it's not, people don't do it purposely. Most newspapers, everything, the majority of the people writing and working there are guys. So they write about what they're interested in. And I'm not saying guys are not interested in the WNBA. I have a boss who's like an over-the-top huge fan, or other women's sports. But I think, people got to start taking a look. It's happened in high school. Like Newsday is very good about giving equal space to, girls and boys sports, all right? Because, why shouldn't we, right? Mm-hmm. So, the WNBA, what is it, 22 years, 21 years, something like that. It has a lot of kinks to work out. It's a big blow, I think, them leaving the Garden and playing up in this, in Westchester. I think that hurts the league. I think, I think they don't have the formula right. And I think, we also have to, people who care about it need to go to more women's games or pay more attention. I don't know. Look at the Summer League. The Summer League kills the WNBA. My son's just like watching, people watch the Summer. You guys watch the Summer League. It kills the WNBA. It being on all the time, I think. So, I don't know how, David Stern, it was his baby. The WNBA was his baby. I think Adam Silver totally supports the WNBA, but it's not his baby. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, it's, and I'm not saying he doesn't want it to succeed, but I think he's a little more, let's make the money guy, and that's generally what the owners want too. I don't think there's a whole lot of owners that, who's the original owner? Jim Dolan I don't think ever really wanted to own the team. I think he held on to it for 3 more years to give Isaiah to something do.
Well, I was gonna ask. You mentioned the move. They're playing in Westchester now, as opposed to playing in the Garden like they had been for ever, really. And I guess my question is it a little bit of wrong place, wrong time now? Because I was reading something, and I'm not gonna quote an exact percentage for the the ratings and the popularity increase, but there's been a surge this summer to people paying attention to it, to people actually watching it, subscribing to the WNBA League Pass. So, I started to think, with the benefit of hindsight, it's sort of wrong place, wrong time. You think you could downsize a little bit, maybe sell some more games out that doesn't rely on the Garden, but now all of a sudden there's this big spike in interest. A lot of people are watching it, or at the very least paying a lot more attention to it than they previously had been. And now you don't have the liberty in the Garden. Now you got to go to Westchester.
And that was a big deal because when other teams came in, you're in New York. So the Garden is really, okay. So tonight, Billy Joel is playing there for the 100th time, all right? So you could just have a zillion Fish and Billy Joel concerts and make a ton of money. Or, you can fill the Garden halfway. And which is still a lot of fans. They average 9,000 fans. You can fill it halfway and not make as much money. And you can't make somebody. You can't make somebody own. I don't really think they've ever really made a lot of money. It's not. It's gonna almost turn into sort of a vanity thing, and maybe eventually will make some money. They have a good television contract, but I don't think anyone's making a lot of money off of it. There's certain teams, Seattle. They have a solid fan base. Minnesota, LA has a really good fan base. But, the Knicks have a really good fan base too. But I don't think that, I don't think they're trekking up to the Westchester place, hold 5, and they have it down. I think they've reconfigured it for 3 or something, which is a little strange. And they're still looking for a buyer. They don't have a buyer. They say they're sorting through offers. But, I think if they had a legitimate, I don't know who. They don't have a buyer. He doesn't want to own the team anymore. And he's owned it for 22 years, right?
There's a lot of work we can still do, but it's nice to see the ratings boost from the WNBA, and we'll see where it goes from here. And that goes across every sport. So we shall see.
let me add one more thing, though.
Of course, go ahead.
If you don't mind. With the WNBA thing, this is the amazing thing. When people watch it, I mean, it's so much better. The level of basketball is so much better than it was 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
I agree.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, it's just such a high level of basketball. And I talked to some people who say, well, it's just like not that, I said, if you went to a game, it's just incredible. I mean, some of these, Brown Stewart, she's a beast,
Yep.
man. I mean, so there's a lot of really good players.
Yeah, the quality of the game is really good. I was in pep band in college, and I looked forward to the women's games just as much as the men's game. It's a completely different game because they rely on different skills. It's just not the same, but it's still entertaining in its own right, and there are so many awesome personalities, and just you can learn a lot from it in terms of even a basketball mind. So a lot to be gained from it. But so Barbara, thanks again for joining. If you guys haven't read her piece on Newsday on Tim Hardaway Jr., give it a read. Follow all of her stuff. She's great. So Barbara, thanks again. Have a good night.
Thanks, you guys. And you can follow me at Mean Barb.
At Mean Barb. Go do it, everyone.
It's a very good handle.
It's a great handle.
All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. I enjoyed it.